Thanks. Hi Anna, can I just do an audio check for you when you get a sec? Thanks. Evening, Councillor Pearson. Can I just do a quick audio check with you, please?
Testing 1, 2.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, hello and welcome to the meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee. It's Tuesday the 9th of September 2025. I'm Councillor Alison Jay, a councillor for Highwoods Ward and chair of this committee, and I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the Town Hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the Town Hall in St Ronald Street. This meeting is being held in the Grand Jury Room in the Town Hall in Colchester and is also being broadcast live over the internet, where it can be watched via the Council's YouTube channel, where the recording will be available to view afterwards. Please, would speakers present use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly, set them to silent, and do not use voice or camera flash functions. There are toilets on every floor in the building and an induction loop in this room for those that need it, and we will have a short break at 7:30 p.m. or an appropriate time. I will now ask members of the committee and attending officers to introduce themselves, starting on my left.
Good evening, Richard Block, Chief Operating Officer.
Good evening, Chair. Councillor Dave Harris, Beerchurch Ward.
Sam McLean, Newtown and Christchurch Ward.
Councillor Natalie Summers, St Anne's St John's Ward.
Councillor Thomas Rowe, Rural North Ward. I am subbing for Sarah Naylor in Lexington and Fraser Ward.
Councillor William Sunnox, Rural North Ward.
Good evening, Councillor Paul Dundas, Tiptree Ward.
Good evening, Jeff Bill, Strategic Housing and Assurance Manager for Colchester City Council.
Good evening, it's Chris Wade, Director of Assets for Colchester Borough Homes.
Good evening, Philip Sullivan, Colchester Borough Homes and Strategic Lead for Housing for the City Council.
Matthew Evans, Democratic Services Officer.
And we also have online Ala de Alessandro, our Section 151 Officer, and Councillor Pearson as Portfolio Holder for Economic Growth and Transformation. Welcome to the meeting. Substitutions, apologies have been received from Councillor Naylor, and we've heard that Councillor Thomas Rowe is standing in her place. Urgent items, if there's any item not on the published agenda, I'm not aware of any urgent items, so we can move on. Item 4, councillors will be asked to say if there are any items on the agenda about which they have a disclosable pecuniary interest or any other registrable interest or non-registrable interest which would prevent them from participating in any discussion of the item or participating in any vote of the item. Do I have any declarations? None? Okay, we will move on. Item 5, minutes of the previous meeting. The committee is asked to confirm that the draft minutes for the meetings of the 17th of June and 29th of July are a correct record. Councillor Sunnox, I know you have raised a couple of questions. The Section 151 officer is prepared to answer those tonight, so I'll pick those up as we go through the relevant items, if that's okay with you.
Yes, that's fine, thanks.
Okay, then is everybody happy to approve those minutes? Okay, noted. Item 6, have your say. There have been no registrations for have your say. There's nobody here to come forward. So moving on to item 7, the landlord social housing. The committee will consider a report which demonstrates, in the City Council's capacity as landlord of social housing, compliance and delivery of the Regulator of Social Housing's consumer and rent standards. Philip, do you want to start with this?
Thanks very much. This is the Q1 landlord performance reports and a summary of Q1 25-26 performance, including in respect of the key compliance metrics as set out at appendices 1 and 2 to the reports. I'll hand over to Chris, who will briefly update on the current position regarding compliance, responsive repairs and voids.
Thank you. So performance is noted in detail in Appendix 1 of the report. The report highlights the compliance areas that are currently below 100%, which I will run through now. So we have asbestos, we have 5 properties without a survey, 3 have appointments, 1 is due for an eviction and 1 is in advanced stages of access. Electrical safety, we have 7 properties remaining, and there are some sensitive issues around hoarding and mental health that we're working with residents with before we carry those out. At gas servicing, we had 2 missing at the end of that quarter. 1 was a missed appointment and 1 had missing documents, but we are at 100% now. So moving on to responsive repairs, at Q1, we had 94.49 repairs completed on time, and our Q1 satisfaction is at 94.1%. With over 12 months, it's at 88.94. We continue to show improvement results over the last 18 months, which is really positive. Our WIP, which is the work in progress jobs overdue awaiting completion, is down to 169. It was at 289 in May. Moving on to voids, at Q1 we had 113 properties relet overall, with an average of 40.67 days from key to key. June was at 37.89, and that compares to June last year of 42.5, which is an improvement there as well. Our performance remains in the top quartile for voids compared to our peers, there is an internal audit of the lettings function, which goes into detail in section 9 of the report. That covers my update. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could just add some further updates, if that's okay, please. So in terms of sickness absence, sickness absence was considered in detail at the 24th of June corporate management team meeting. This was an item that came up, in fact, the last 2 Governance and Audit Committee meetings. We reviewed long-term sickness absence, the importance of manager-led intervention, and not waiting for HR involvement. That was in June. That was followed up in August on whether HR was seeing the necessary sickness absence management taking place by managers. And that was particularly in 2 teams where sickness absence was higher than the remainder. Feedback was that there had been notable improvement in both areas. The July and August absence levels are both encouraging, as the rolling average sickness for sickness is reduced in both months and now stands at 10.6 days. If I can just move on to regulation, a brief update on regulation. The recently published Regulator's report on understanding the condition of tenants' homes emphasises the importance of knowing your stock. An update on stock condition surveys for the City Council is set out in 5.8 of the reports. But also the Council has a range of additional sources of assurance on the Council's stock data quality. For example, all stock condition surveys are reviewed for anomalies, 5% are randomly selected for independent validation, and internal audits provide a further source of assurance. Then in terms of updates on complaints, that's set out in section 8 of the report, and a summary of Ombudsman cases is provided at Appendix 3. CBH is providing assurance in respect of complaint handling performance the full implementation of Ombudsman determinations and lessons being learned to help deliver service improvements. Communication has been identified as a recurring theme in complaints and Ombudsman findings, and training has recently been rolled out to relevant staff, and a lessons learned page is live on CBH's website. I can also update to advise that the Resident Asset Forum, referred to in 8.4, has now had its first meeting. Details of 2 internal audits of relevance to the regulatory standards are provided in section 9, one of which lettings was a substantial assurance. And finally, in terms of additional regulatory assurance, if I can briefly highlight some key points from section 10. The first in terms of strategic risks. The strategic risks of relevance to landlord services, they're detailed in the reports, were reviewed and are reviewed at every CBH board meeting. And the last time was in August, and the CBH board was satisfied that the risks were being appropriately reflected in the map and that relevant steps were being taken to mitigate those risks. And then in terms of customer engagement, which again from a regulatory perspective is very important, the board is satisfied that we are meeting the regulator's expectations, including in respect of giving tenants a wide range of meaningful opportunities to influence and scrutinise strategies. You can see the assurance from CBH's Finance and Audit Committee, including that they scrutinise the ongoing actions from internal audits so that we gain assurance that all of them are completed satisfactorily. And from Operations and Performance Committee, including where they received detailed action status breakdown on fire risk assessment actions, which are key in terms of the safety of residents, but also from a regulatory perspective. I'll stop there, Chair, and open up for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just before I address questions, just from my own point of view, you mentioned antisocial behaviour. That's something I'm sort of seeing in my ward, where we've had a sort of broader uptick in incidents. Is there any particular external drivers in that, and what action are we taking within Colchester Borough Homes to sort of address it, rather than just note that it's going up?
So I think there's no one issue that I would say definitively says why cases are going up. But what I would say is that we have a dedicated team, specialist team at CBH, and the cases that they're seeing, a number of them I would call intense. You know, they're not mild antisocial behaviour. They are dealing with, you know, serious cases of threats of violence, or which often cross over into criminal behaviour as well, but they do take robust action in respect of it. But in terms of, is there a specific reason why cases have gone up? Not that I'm aware of. I think it's just, you know, the volume of just goes up and reduces over time. There is an intensity at the moment, though, particularly in terms of the severity.
Okay, thank you very much. I've forgotten your name. Councillor Summers will do, and then I'll go to Councillor Dundas. I apologise.
No worries. Thanks. Pleased to see there's a lot of good improvements going on in this report. But I was just wondering, obviously, over time, the number of complaints per 1,000 properties have been going up. Do we know what the reason might be behind that? Is it because obviously, is it because people are more aware of their rights, so they speak up more, because you've been doing more resident engagement? Has that led to an increase in complaints? And my other question is regarding the increase, obviously, in homelessness and temporary accommodation. We all know we've got a big problem, and it's countrywide, but do we see that continuing to rise over the next sort of year or so, and or it might start dropping soon? I mean, obviously, I was reading that obviously inflation is expected to get up to 4%, and obviously fuel costs are rising again. There's the renters' rights bill coming in that's obviously some landlords are not overly happy with and might be deciding to get out of that sort of thing. I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of complaints, it's a bit of an unusual one because in some respects we welcome complaints and we publicise our complaints policy and we're very open, and actually we're required to be by the Housing Ombudsman. So we've promoted the Ombudsman, we've promoted our complaints, and we do publicise, as I mentioned, and you'll see, our lessons learned from complaints. So it is highly visible, which means that we're accessible and people do, where we get it wrong, people do complain. What I would say is that I'm not aware that we are disproportionate from our peers and the sector, but you've seen the volume that come through. But what is really important, and I've touched on, is the fact that we do learn lessons from them. And we've got a very comprehensive service improvement log. So for every complaint that comes in, we identify what we could have done differently. We then track that as a corporate management team in terms of seeing that go through, and we publicise what we've done in response to that so that tenants know that we are listening to their feedback. So I know it sounds a bit strange, but you can look on complaints negatively, or in many respects we look at them as opportunities to improve, but we do need to improve. So when we do get the complaints, we do need to listen and we do need to improve. And then secondly, in terms of homelessness, just to update you, in fact, on the current position, because in the last month, the numbers have gone down slightly. So at the end of June, we were reporting the figure as 458 households in temporary accommodation. At the end of July, that had gone down to 438. And just briefly, because it's really important for us and the City Council, the number of households in bed and breakfast was at 55 at the end of July, the lowest level for over 2 years. Only one family has been in bed and breakfast for over 6 weeks. That's a real target for us, and it's a target for the government as well, MHCLG. But in some respects, the volumes aren't changing. Just briefly, one of the things that I think we've seen a bit of a spike in the last year has been because of the Renters' Rights Bill coming through. We've seen a number of landlords choosing to take their properties back and evicting their tenants. But I think we might have seen the back of that because the Renters' Rights Bill is about to come in. We've been waiting for it for a long time, but it is about to come in. So it may be that we've seen the spike of that. But that doesn't mean that the pressures aren't going to continue. It's very difficult to predict, but we still have a housing crisis. We still have thousands of people looking for accommodation locally. The number of homes let in July was 62, but in terms of bids for accommodation, for the highest bid, a 3-bedroom home, we had 448 bids for that one property. So I think it is very premature, and in fact I don't think it would be right to say that the pressure isn't going to continue. But it is positive that the number went down by 20 in July. And finally, briefly, because I appreciate I'm talking possibly a bit too much, we have Beyond the Box coming online, so the second stage of Beyond the Box in about a week's time. So in terms of the quality of accommodation and the cost to the council, we've got some benefits coming our way in the next few weeks.
Thank you for that. Now, I think Beyond the Box is a great idea. Obviously brought in under the previous portfolio holder, Paul Smith. I was really a big supporter of that, and I'm pleased to see that that's continuing and expanding, because it makes such a difference to people to actually have access to being able to do their laundry, being able to do their own cooking, rather than, as I say, being in a hotel and being in a hotel for 6 weeks when you've got children is not a great way to live. So it's great to see that that's continuing. Thank you very much.
Councillor Dundas, you had a question? Right, yeah.
Just going to add a quick point on there. Over the past couple of years, Section 21 evictions have been the main reason for homelessness. Last month was the first month for a couple of years that it hasn't been, and it was actually eviction of family and friends that was the main reason for homelessness. So there is a bit of a change.
Interesting. Okay, Councillor Dundas.
Thank you. Good to see you all again. Doesn't seem like 5 minutes since you were here. We were looking at these in the last quarter. Actually, just quick comment. We were talking about the renters' rights bill and landlords looking to get out of the market. So anecdotally, in sort of private life, I deal with, for tax purposes, quite a lot of private landlords, and I've seen a lot who have either done so or are looking to get out of the market. And I actually think we haven't seen anything yet. I think a lot have been humming and hawing. I think a lot of people are waiting for the budget in the autumn to see if there's a further impact. There's also a lot of people who are saying, well, if I'm going to stay as a landlord, the risk has gone up and the price is going to have to go up. It's like anything else. You reduce the supply, the price goes up. So I think as tenancies end and the market changes over the next 2 or 3 years, I think you're going to see real price pressure in the private rented market due to lack of availability and people simply reprofiling their risks. But it's probably a different subject. All I was going to comment on actually was perhaps also relating to rents. Within the document pack, we see that we have rent arrears have gone down slightly, which is positive. And although it's sort of nearly 700,000 as a percentage overall in terms of, this is a big business, I appreciate that that's not actually a very high percentage at all, but we have 152 tenants in debt to over £900. I was just wondering what the sort of, if we're noticing a sort of profile difference. No, I think I'm running saying approaching 70% of our tenants are on benefits of around 65, and obviously, presumably within that we have, mixture of housing benefit and universal credit, whereas one is paid directly and one isn't. I think I'm right in saying. So are we seeing, presumably, where somebody is on housing benefit, they can't really get into arrears in quite the same way. Are we seeing a breakdown in terms of those getting behind on rent? There's more who are on universal credit than aren't on benefits, or vice versa. Have we got any figures as to try and bit of background who the people are who are perhaps getting into difficulties around their rents?
Yeah, thanks. Really important points. Thank you. Just briefly, in terms of the 152, just to give you some assurance, that will also be 152 tenants where we are working with them. It's not that there's no action, and often we have court cases, suspended possession orders, and they then have to comply with that. So just to give you that assurance, we will be working with that 152. In terms of UC and housing benefit, a very significant percentage, if not the vast majority now, of our tenants are now on UC. And you're right to highlight that it is a different position because it's paid in arrears and because it's paid direct to the tenant. But there are examples where, for example, someone has fallen into significant arrears or other circumstances where we can apply for alternative payment arrangements where it is paid to the landlord. But often it's had to go so far before we can do that, which means we're having to recover afterwards. So I think the changes have added an element of complication in our rent collection and our arrears management. But bearing in mind the shift into UC, our current performance this year compared to last year and where we are in the current year is relatively strong, but it doesn't mean it's not a constant pressure.
There is also a bit of ongoing at the moment, the rollout from HB to UC, so that's ongoing, and we'll pick up the final people moving on to UC. But there is also a 6 weeks delay in the first payment of UC, so there are 6 weeks where, in theory, there's no payment made, and that's where some of the arrears occurs to start off with.
Paul, did you want to go back?
I was just thinking, do we do attachment orders? Or, I know we do for council tax, but I've seen lots of them. But for housing rent, is that something we do or can do?
I'm not aware that we do, but can I take that away and check and come back to you? It's okay. I'm not aware, but I will check.
Thank you. Councillor McLean, you wanted to raise a question.
Thank you, Chair. This is a good report, so I'm quite pleased. I have a question about data breaches. was is what have you done in response? And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So the data breaches are, generally speaking, relatively minor in nature, and they tend to be where, for example, the autofill on email, and there's two people with the same surname and it's been sent to the wrong person. So it tends to be limited in terms of the number of people it's sent to, nature. In terms of what we do about it, we highlight, if in the past where we've had a particular problem with a specific team because of the risk, we've trained them, we've raised awareness within the team, we focused it on that team. But also more generally, if we see a spike, then when we have all staff, directors live events or online briefings, we'll highlight it to all staff as well. So it is really, much of it is around awareness raising and making sure staff know, where to be cautious and what not to be doing.
Councillor Rowe, did you want to?
Sorry, I keep adding on to what Philip's saying. I just wanted to sort of put that in a bit of perspective as well, in terms of the number of customer contacts there are a month. You're talking 12,000, so it is 8 out of 12,000, which is, puts it in a bit more perspective. But 8 is too many.
But you wouldn't call them serious breaches?
No.
Correct. Thank you.
Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chair. Just on that point, actually, we did have a similar issue in where I work, and they turned off the sort of auto-fill with regards to emails, and then they added in an additional piece of software which makes you basically double check, and it tells you if it's an external, if there's an external member on there, it makes you check. So I can't remember what it's called, something like a safe check or something like that. It might be worth double checking that and seeing if that's feasible. I think it's already been pointed out a couple of times. I think we've sort of touched on the point around the homelessness, but I just wanted to ask an additional question on it. I think I'm right in saying that the cost of homelessness has risen by 15%, I think I read in the document somewhere. Could you just sort of briefly touch on, because I mean, you sort of pointed out that the numbers are on the slide, i.e. they're going the right way, so that's a good thing. So I'd just like to understand what's driving the increased cost, and as an additional point to that, how are we working with our partners and sort of whoever else we need to, to try to keep those costs under control or to mitigate those costs in the future? Thank you.
Okay, so there's several things there. In terms of costs, so at the moment, this financial year, we are forecasting to overspend. Not by anything like the level of last year, but we are forecasting to overspend. And I mean, it's not an exact science, but the reality is that we didn't budget enough. Because between the time of budgeting and the financial year starting, the number of temporary households in temporary accommodation had gone up by 10%. So we were straight away chasing our tail. But we didn't budget enough, and that's that's something that we have to be transparent about. But numbers have gone up significantly, but beyond the box is materially better value. I would say cheaper, but better value than bed and breakfast. Very significantly better value than bed and breakfast. There's two reasons for that. One is that the cost of the accommodation is lower. And the second is the amount of rent we can get in from the family or the individual is higher compared to bed and breakfast. So the net cost to the council is significantly better. Which means that despite numbers going up, the total cost to the council is going down compared because of the B&B is shifting into beyond the box. So what more can we do? Well, first of all, I think beyond the box took us in the right direction. We do have a significant number of additional beyond the box, I will say units, coming our way, starting in the next week or so. So that will further help to the extent that where we've got 55 households in bed and breakfast, that will be coming down to single figures in the next 3 months. We would very much expect. We will completely eliminate it, but that will be coming down. So I think it is about finding new ways of providing accommodation that meets the needs but is more cost effective. And I would say, to be frank, beyond the box has been the main thrust of our attention on that.
Yes, Richard.
Thank you.
Just to add, this is a concern clearly that the council has, the council side has, because this is a direct impact on our revenue fund, and you're receiving a first quarter outturn report later that shows that overspend. So there is a real focus from the council as well to work with CBH to understand those costs better and identify whether there's any further opportunities to actually reduce them and mitigate them. And we're going to be launching a joint project with CBH and lean in a bit more from the council's perspective, just to understand those costs and ensure we have a robustness.
Did you want to?
Yeah, sorry,
Did you want to come back?
Yeah, if I just come back on that, I think I agree and I understand exactly what you're saying. I think from a scrutiny perspective, we discussed sort of how we could better forecast these numbers. I think you sort of touched on it as well. And I think ultimately, I don't think we're trying to forecast, to catch anyone out. I think it needs to be forecasted for us to understand what are the pressures and the things that we miss and how do we do it properly going forward. And I really think that we need to get more transparent around the way we do that and involve the wider groups. Thank you.
Councillor Sunnax, you had a question?
Yes, and I apologise in a way for asking a third question, and maybe even the fourth question today about homelessness. But in a way, that is sort of what this is all about, is reducing, and that is why councils house people. What can we do to improve the way to manage the 6,000 council dwellings that we currently have better, so that people who don't need them move on, and so we can bring in people who really do need them at the bottom? What are we doing about that? I know it's politically difficult, but surely that's what we need. Is Tom and I were discussing it at all. We're calling it a laxative for the system, so that people move through. They come in, they're in a council house for 5 years or whatever they need. If they don't need it at that end, what are we doing to move them on? And how else could we manage our 6,000? It's only 7% of them we need to release, and we've suddenly housed every homeless family we seem to be dealing with. So it's just a little thought, and I think we should focus on that as well as expanding the portfolio.
Philip?
So the one word answer to your question is we can't do anything. Once a tenancy is given, it's for life. There are no fixed term tenancies or anything like that, and we cannot force tenants to move out. What we can do is make better use of our stock, which is what we do with incentives around getting tenants to downsize from larger 3 and 4 bedroom properties to smaller properties. But as it stands, there is nothing that we can do to force a tenant to leave a council property.
So some councils are issuing fixed term tenancies. Some councils are doing convergence, so they're raising the rents for existing tenancies. They're using flexibility to push the rents up where they need to. Are we looking at any of those sorts of things?
So, I mean, it's all really important points. In terms of fixed-term tenancies, what social landlords can do is introduce introductory tenancies for a year, and as long as the tenant sort of meets their elements of the conditions of tenancy, they will become a secure tenant or an assured tenant if you're a housing association tenant. But we don't offer, as a sector, we don't offer fixed-term tenancies for social tenants. They have security of tenure. That's the legislation, the environment that we operate in.
So how are some councils doing it?
I couldn't answer that. I'm happy to have a conversation with you and get into more detail. Very happy to do that. But then in terms of, just to give you a bit of assurance, we've done some work recently through the Housing Board looking at our allocations policy and whether in fact there is some flexibility within that. And actually, having done that, there's several challenges. One is that when someone's in temporary accommodation, they are registered on Gateway to Home Choice to get permanent accommodation, to move into a council house or a housing association property. But they are banded and they are prioritised in a fair and consistent way with other people on Gateway to Home Choice. And if we don't allocate to that person, we do it to the person who's in temporary accommodation, that person may end up being homeless. So it's a bit of, a balancing act that we have to do. Final bit of assurance is that some of the good work that the council has done is some of our buybacks, because Jeff will correct me if I'm wrong, but we can allocate them outside of Gateway to Home Choice, which means that we are using them for people currently in temporary accommodation. And the final thing I say is the added complication on Gateway to Home Choice is it is an allocations policy that spans currently 7 local authorities and a number of housing associations. So if we change it, it will be in conjunction with them. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't challenge and we shouldn't look at changing where it's for the right reasons, but just to provide that context.
Yes, I think it's more about, not about how we divide the cake, how the allocation goes. It's about how we can increase it by moving on people that don't need, and stopping right to buy in every way we possibly can. And I'm just interested to know whether the team has initiatives and ideas and thoughts about how this could be done and whether we can give any support.
I mean, several things. First of all, you, as a city council, collectively, in my view, you are giving support because, you've just agreed a HRA business plan that has growth in it. We need that accommodation. That is a key element of, that is a key element of trying to tackle the housing crisis. So I think as a city council, you are doing the right things. But in terms of stopping the right, and that's in terms of, you say how can we move people on or increase the supply, that building more or acquiring more is an option the city council has decided. But then just in terms of the right to buy, the government has announced some changes. So in the last week's report to Cabinet, Housing State of the Nation, those were set out there. So the government is changing the period that you have to have lived in a social house from memory from 3 to 10 years before you can apply. They've already reduced the discount, so it's less attractive. And finally, they are introducing that if it's a new social home, that it can't be purchased for 35 years. So there are some changes coming through, which I think will stem the outflow of properties through right to buy.
Councillor Rowe, I don't know if your question was sort of linked to that, or I can move on to Councillor Harris. Yeah, if you
It
want
is,
to
if
pick
it's
that.
okay. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, just on the fixed term point. So you're saying there's no legislation at all. So if someone sort of comes into social housing, gets a load of promotions, gets a 250 grand a year job, they can still remain in their council house. They win the Euro Millions. There's nothing we can do to move those people out. Is that correct?
So just to sort of build on that, there's two separate things: fixed term tenancies and there's an income. So if I can just say fixed term tenancies, we can't, to my knowledge, offer a new tenant coming into the city council's accommodation a fixed term tenancy. Okay. But there is something out there where people earn a lot of money, and I can't remember exactly what it's called, but housing associations and I believe councils can make a policy decision that if someone earns over, again I can't remember off the top of my head, 60,000 or £100,000, that you can say that they would need to move out. Where this has been looked at by a number, so some will probably have adopted it, but the administration of trying to track these people down, the cost of that has been disproportionate to actually the rewards. That doesn't mean it's something that shouldn't be explored, and if that's something the council wants us to revisit, and I'd need to go back and check the facts and make sure that we bring back factual information, and of course we'd be happy to do that. So that is something that could be explored.
I can see.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Pearson, you've asked a question or raised your hand.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say I've been looking up, and I know that under the Localism Act 2011, there is the power of local authorities to actually issue fixed term tenancies. Some councils did do that. The nearest one that I'm aware of is Brentwood, where they offer 5-year fixed term contracts, but with a review to determine whether that goes on. We've never done that in Colchester, so that would require a change of policy from the majority of councillors in the council chamber to do that. Whether that will change, whether that power will be removed under the new act or the bill, I don't know. But my response would also be, if you talk about the 7% churn, Councillor Rowe, if we build 7% more council houses, we don't need to worry about that churn going forward.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harris, did you want to add something?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, and good evening all. Yes, for me, as a responsible member of this committee, the Governance and Audit, I was looking for some assurance that Colchester Homes was doing all the things, and there's some, as other councillors have already said before me, Councillor McLean and Dundas, there's some good news in this report, so I thank you for that. The voids, beyond the box situation, the energy performance, all going the right way, lots of things going the right way. A couple of questions, Chair, if I may. One is on the asbestos and the asset management. There's two different paragraphs that deal with asset management and figures about, and we've asset managed our stock to death. Great, I'm really pleased about that. We've got a lot of information about our housing stock. I'm sure we should have, because we've been good landlords for many years. There's also an asbestos report in here, and I wonder whether that asbestos is a specific report that's separate, and I'm guessing the board's looked at this, whether there's houses out there that have been asbestos tested that never need to be done again, or there's others that we've done one thing in the house, like a kitchen, but there's other bits in the house that may need future. And I wonder whether those two factors are looked at, and there's a list somewhere of both. That's the sort of thing I was looking at, really.
I think you've answered your question. Yes, there is. So we'll keep an eye on it. We have to do management surveys, which are high level. We do these other surveys when we do work called demolition surveys. So we keep good records and make sure we don't go in twice and things like that. Thank you
for that assurance. So the second question I've got is over damp and mould. Obviously, there's a law coming in, etc. There's good news in this report. I saw that, the figures, etc. But it didn't say how many, whether there was a particular style of house that is more prevalent in others. And I'm guessing that the data is held by Colchester Homes. We don't need to see that data, but I'm just wanted that assurance that you would know whether you'd advise the customer, the tenant, if it's lifestyle that needs to change, or whether something needs to change in the household itself, and whether there's a particular type of property, whether there's a pepper pot that you can look at a map that says there's more in that particular estate because there's that type of age of housing and none there.
Yeah, we've got over 500 devices that were put into properties that tell us that type of information. It does differ because some people might not be able to afford to heat their properties, so then we put them in the right direction to try and get support. So yeah, we do hold a lot of data and try and be proactive in our approach and contact people to say that you could be at risk. We do lots of tenancy audits as well. So when the housing officers go into the properties, they're asked to look at that as well. So for us, it's about using the technology, but also getting out there and making sure that we see these things and give the right advice. We've also got things like the damp and mould road shows that we do around Colchester, and we'll continue to do those and make sure that we promote those so people can come along at the right times as well, not just in the daytime, and try and do weekends as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. Very good report.
Okay, thank you. I think we're at a point where, subject to any particular recommendations wanted to be raised, I think that was a very comprehensive report, a good level of assurance there, so thank you very much. I think some of the data now really drills down, so we're able to ask better questions as well, which is useful. Our committee happy that we note that all the updates are provided in the report. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all for your time. Okay, moving on to item 8.1, which is the Q1 25-26 finance report. We've got Anna D'Alessandro online to give us a brief overview. Anna, if you want to do that, and then perhaps move on to the audit question that was raised by Councillor Sunnox coming from the earlier minutes.
Good evening, members and chair. I wasn't going to present the quarter report, the finance report. Caroline, who's in the room, will present that, and then I will do, that's okay. I will do the Treasury Management report, if that's all right, Chair.
Yes, that's fine. Caroline, do you want to present the report then?
Good evening. So if there's any questions I don't know today, I will endeavour to get some answers for you as soon as possible after tonight. Okay, so the General Fund Q1 summary, we have a gross variance before reserves application of approximately £5.3 million. There are four main drivers for that 5.3 million gross, which is 1.8 million gross overspend on corporate landlord. That pressure relates to the empty units at CNG site, and I'm sure this is a known issue. We are using what's some of the turnstone reserve to offset that undelivered income. So after reserves application, it broadly nets out. Obviously that's an ongoing problem, and I know the team are working quite hard to make sure we've got the forecast in as robust as possible for the future. The next biggest gross overspend is corporate services, which is 1.45 million gross, and after reserves application is £1 million. This is mostly due to staffing costs within finance, operational finance, benefits and technical, with some e-billing and licence support, and also a small amount in governance. After, as I've said, after the reserves application, we'll have a net overspend of about 1 million at the end of Q1. The next biggest gross overspend is in place prosperity at 0.9 million. That is again netted out once you apply reserves, because the there's a big chunk of local plan costs, and there are some town deal salaries and city centre posts that are also covered by reserves. And the final item is the 0.5 million overspend on housing and wellbeing, which you've just had a more detailed view as to the reasons why from Philip there. So we're looking at the end of Q1, we're looking that we're spending £3.3 million post-reserve, we're using 3.3 million of reserves, which gives us a net variance after reserves application at Q1 of just shy of 2.3 million. I don't know if this is an appropriate time to stop for some revenue questions, which I'm happy to take.
Yes, Richard.
Sorry, just to add, because this report obviously has been via the Senior Leadership Board, and part of the discussion we had, you will see a significant forecast underspend on capital expenditure. What isn't in this forecast is the associated savings in capital financing costs. That is being worked on, but if you take a look back, similar levels of underspends have resulted in, for the last 3 years, a £2 million underspend in capital financing costs. That will come through, I believe, on the next quarter budget reports that this committee receives.
Thank you. Have I got any questions? Yes, Councillor Dundas.
Thank you. Yeah, just to pick up on that, of course, though, unless you're actually changing the capital programme, what it does is push the cost forward, so you're going to have a bigger overspend next year. So, you know, looking at your MTFF, it doesn't change where you end up, because unless you're actually axing capital programmes, then that capital spend will be moved forward to a different quarter or a different financial year. So, yeah, it helps a bit in the short term, but long term, it actually is worse, because you've got still trouble on the MTFF. I've just got a few questions, actually, really. Just on, you mentioned the CNG and the turnstone reserve. We've used £1.7 million worth of it this quarter. Now we're nearly at the end of Q2, and although imminently we hope things are going to change, will be changing. Looking at that logically, that would imply looking at Q2, we'll have used 3.4 million thus far this year. we used a fair chunk of it last year, and it started out at 4 million. So my question is, looking at the next quarter monitoring, it looks like we'll have burnt through that reserve and actually be into taking money off the general fund outside of reserves. So I just wanted to ask if that is correct interpretation. And on that, and I guess this is more of a comment than a question, I mean, on page 66, we kind of say, however, you know, our whopping great loss is offset and therefore has no bottom line impact for the council overall, almost as if it doesn't matter. I've got to be honest, I take rather issue with that, because if this was a conventional set of accounts, if you made a whopping great loss and it happens to come out of a bank account, you've still made a whopping great loss and it's still £1.7 million worth of public money down the drain. I get why it's put that, and I do understand it, but I do take slight issue with the wording on that, but we'll let that go. So a second specific question is, on page 73, we talk about waste and the capital underspend, and we say it's due to lead times, yet it also says they haven't been ordered. So that would rather imply, well, you know, if the lead times are long, why haven't we ordered them earlier? We've only ordered one, it says, so it's not lead times, it's the fact that we haven't even ordered them. So there seems to be a bit of a contradiction there. I would have thought if the lead times are long, we'd have got them ordered even earlier, but I don't know. Also, on page 74, we talk a little bit about the town deal. And one project in there, and I understand it's complicated because there's a heavy HRA element as well, but the biggest single project in the town deal was the Heart of Grinstead. So could we have a little bit of an update as to where we actually are on that? Not a lot has happened that I've seen visibly thus far. So a little bit of information as to the status of that in terms of the capital programme going forward, and the spending would be useful. On page 75, just going back, just for confirmation, back to the Turnstone thing again, have we actually got the £2 million cash in the bank now? Because it talks about the net spend on our capital is 6 million, but the net spend's 4 million because we're receiving 2 million from elsewhere. Just wanted to check we've actually got that in the bank account. And finally, my favourite one, every year we have the 6.8 million on the CNG enabling works, which is imminently going to be spent any day now. And I remember somebody sitting here this time last year saying, we're going to the contractors within the week and it will be sent. Well, we look back, I actually checked it online this evening. Still nothing's happened. Is that realistic? That figure is in there to be spent in the next 6 months. Has anything happened? Is that realistic to still be in the capital programme for this year, or are we just kind of kidding ourselves and we should put it forward into next year? So, thank you.
Okay, so in terms of the town deal and all of your capital questions, I will have to take some of those away because I think most of my focus has been on the revenue since I've started, so I'll just have to be honest with you. Which I'll endeavour to go and get those answers for you. There's a big lot of work happening around capital and assurances and how much money we're utilising at the moment, and that's ongoing. In terms of Turnstone Reserve, my understanding was we started at 4 million and we utilised 1.6 million last year. We should have had an opening balance of about 2.4 million for 25-26. Now, the forecast for month 5, I may as well say, is a 2 million utilisation of that reserve. So your assumptions are correct in terms of it's on track to not have much cash left beyond this financial year. So your assumptions are correct.
Anna, did you want to come in at this point, or?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of general comments. On Turnstone, those figures that come from Turnstone, just to be crystal clear, don't come from us. They come from the corporate landlord function. So I don't think it's fair to ask us those questions. We are the reporters of that information. The information that was presented to you in the report since we have started reporting on corporate landlord has come from the function. So every month they do update us, and our role is to report the information and to challenge it and to make sure that there is a comprehensive narrative around what's reported. So that's what we do, and that's what our role is. I understand your concerns, but that is concerns that we will relay back to the service, and you will see some replies to those and more narrative when we bring the Q2 report to GNA. On capital, Caroline is correct. There's a load of work going on capital, both looking at the upside on the capital program. That what Richard referred to earlier was because MRP works a year in arrears, we had about 50% slippage on the capital program last year. So the team are currently working it through. Previous year's indications won't necessarily be future indications of upside, but so I'm not committing to a number. We are working that through at the moment. And again, with what happens in capital, the information we provide is information that's given to us from the project managers and program managers. And yes, slippage is a constant problem. But we're doing work on both what the capital program will be looking like and will be reset to for 25, 26 and future years. And as part of that, we'll be looking at all of the financing requirements that go along with that. And we will try and manage it as best we can. But again, it's the program managers are the ones that give us the information.
Thank you very much. Caroline, did you want to pick up the other questions?
I hate to say this, but I don't actually know about the lead time on the waste questions as well, so I will have to come back to you on that. Apologies.
We actually have Councillor Mark Horey here, portfolio holder for resources. So as you've indicated, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll try and help with a bit of colour on some of those issues. With waste, Richard Block here as well to help us. A former officer running waste, there could be another line in there, I think, that says due to the waste strategy being finalised, because actually we've had government changes over the last 9 months that have wanted us to know exactly where to land the waste strategy in terms of making sure we're not penalised in any way with their changes. And as you well know, we've got the extended producer pay money coming in, which is nice to have, but we don't want to lose any of that by changing to a scheme that the government do not approve of. So we have been remodelling the waste strategy. I don't know how that has been shared yet through the governance, but Richard, you might be able to help with that. So I think that would be an additional line of explanation from me to say that's why there has been some delay. I don't know operationally about the lead-in times. Richard may do from historic thoughts, and I can come back, Richard, if you go on that, and then I can come back on some of the other matters.
With your permission, Chair. So absolutely correct, Councillor Corey. It's a planned delay, and that's why I think it's a little bit unfair to say it's by accident. It's actually a planned delay in purchasing the vehicles. We could purchase a load of vehicles that would be the wrong ones, and I think as members you'd be very unhappy with that if it doesn't deliver a service that maximises the government income and the service delivery model that would be best placed for the city. So it's a deliberate delay. The lead-in time has actually extended massively because several councils are looking at their waste strategy in light of the government's changed requirements, and as such they're all ordering waste vehicles, which has extended the lead time on those vehicles as well.
So therefore that line is correct, but the line would have been helpful in the narrative, I think is what we're saying here. So that would have been more helpful just to add in that extra fact about the waste strategy. On part of Greenstead, at this point, I can't give you much more of an update, but it is going through our governance system at the moment in terms of looking at costs, looking at value engineering, because the cost of the project has increased over time. You wouldn't be surprised to hear. So working out what we can deliver as partners in the project, that includes Essex County Council and Health. We're looking at how we can fund this project to fruition and make it work. It is a project that could deliver a lot of positive outcomes for all of us in terms of residents, for our health, well-being, the highest indicator of deprivation sort of in that area of town. So we are still very supportive of that project, but we will soon be reporting back what we're finding in terms of costs there, Councillor Dundas. So we'll come back to you on that one in specifics. Turnstone, we're very close with that, so we have legal we had legal work in place as to how to pass the money over. If Patricia was here, she'd be able to explain in full, but we are very close on having that in our bank account. We actually have some ongoing discussions with Turnstone about their previous contracts with their developer on the site as well. But that should all come into place, hopefully, when we see a positive move on a cinema provider. So hopefully within a few weeks. So do ask me that question again within a month, and hopefully I can give you a positive answer. I know your pessimism over it, and I fully understand that. It has been based on a relationship that we have had with Turnstone for 10 years, and them ensuring that they continue that positive relationship. I don't think for them as a developer it would be good to walk away without some support. So I do hope we will have that 2 million, and I will be able to positively say that to you very soon. On the CNG infrastructure, that is there within the capital programme. So that could be a long story. I'll try and be short, Chair. We continue to work at that site in terms of the different sites that you may remember, being the residential sites, the C1, C2 and C3, and which ones are coupled to the highways works and which ones aren't. We have actually had quite a painful process with the highways works that I can share with you, or you may hear through Team Colchester. We do want to absolutely nail down with Essex and with National Highways what exactly it is they want to get the final numbers on the work. And what we are doing is we're working with ACOM, who are the professionals on this. We will see further costs from them because they're having to remodel their original models. We've had changes from highways as to whether you put in bus stops, lay-bys, whether you don't. So that has caused further delay. What I would say in terms of that is we absolutely have money ready to go, but when we deliver it is a sort of strategic decision, because we can deliver parcels of land up there which we've decoupled from the highway scheme, and a further piece of land we could possibly decouple and move forward with. But at the same time, some of the pieces of land actually would benefit from having the highways work done. So it's not a delay to the process, it's actually deciding when the best time is to do those works. And at this point in time, we believe, as I think you will know, we've been explaining how we're getting those parcels of land out. R1 and R2, the residential pieces of land, which we had a discussion about here or at scrutiny, those are out to the market with social landlords. They are not dependent, they are not coupled to the highways work. So we should be getting back in October bids on those parcels of land, and with C1, that's out at the moment too. C3 is dependent. C3 is a parcel of land that is closest to the A12. That would be dependent on highways works taking some of that land. So it's approximately 4.6 hectares, and it might go down to 3.6 because the highways land take on it. So again, we need the final detail from highways to know the exact hectareage of the land to be able to put it to market. So that's the kind of detail we're working with. So it's not, again, that one's not a delay, it's a working out when we do the highways work, and it's working with Essex Highways and National Highways, which has been quite a journey, let's say. Hopefully that helps give some detail.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dundas, did you want to
Yeah,
come back?
thank you, it does. And I hope I'm not too pessimistic. I try not to be. I don't think I'm pessimistic. I just always think when we are putting assumptions around money coming in reports, I just think sometimes we should be more cautious about caveating them. So I'm not saying we're not going to get it. I'm just saying, making it clear in the report that it is subject to it actually turning up and find a legal agreement, because we're very good at perhaps almost being, there are projects, let's be honest, as a council, we've been very optimistic about in the past, and we've come a cropper a little bit because of that. So I think realism rather than pessimism, I hope. And in terms of obviously, asking the questions or whatever in the report, and particularly around the waste and that, which I do understand, and I think that's an explanation is fine. As a committee and as people, councillors scrutinising the report, we can only take the report face value as it's presented to us in front of us. So when it says delays are driven by extended lead times on HGVs, we don't look at that and say, oh, that can't be the reason, it must be something else. Now, I know if we read it on, it then talks about the review, which is fine. But equally, I think, you know, it's fair enough that if that's what it says, then we kind of think, well, it's driven by extended lead times on HGVs, because it says that. And equally, in terms of asking the questions, you know, with respect, your name is on the report, it's your report, you're the people here. If other people are needed to answer other parts of the report, perhaps they should be here as well, because it's our job to scrutinise it. But equally, I perfectly think it's quite reasonable to say, well, we need to go away and ask that question elsewhere. And I think committee members, would hope, would be quite reasonable about that. But, you know, I think it's fair enough that all of us as committee members ask any questions we like on any part of this report, because this is what's been presented to us.
Thank you. Councillor Sunnucks, did you want to, before we move on to the rest of the report?
Yes, 3 questions, and Caroline, probably not for you. Perhaps I'm going to direct them to the portfolio holder who's sitting here, drinking his water. First question: the R1 and R2 are on the market. Are they on the open market, or has it been restricted to social landlords only? Question number 2. When has there been scrutiny? I saw in one of these reports that the cost of this Turnstone development has gone from 65 million when we started to 75 million. I don't think any of us is amazed over a period of inflation that the costs have inflated. I don't think that should be a surprise. But when have we had any scrutiny of it? And how have we been part of a governance and audit committee for all these years that's never really got round to, you know, why those costs have... what's been going on the costs. And you mentioned, portfolio holder, you mentioned that there's some discussions going on with Turnstone about their contract with the developer. So where are the cost overruns been going? Were we assured, I think we were assured, that it was a fixed price contract and there wouldn't be, but somehow it's crept up from 65 to 75 million. I'm not surprised, but where has it crept up? And how is it that we've been on a governance and audit committee that's let this major development go on, 10 million of cost overruns go through, and we've never really had any visibility of it? So that's question number 2. Question number 3 is about interest. Could we, this I guess is a question for officers, could we disaggregate, we lump everything into financing costs or something like that? You can never see what the interest paid, the interest received, and the MRP is, unless you dig and dig and dig. Can we have a habit of disaggregating those? They're huge costs and they really matter. And we've heard how the falling behind of our capital programme is going to help us. Well, let's see it. And what I'm concerned about is it looks to me as if the charging of interest between the HRA and the general fund means that actually the general fund is earning more interest than it's paying. And I don't know how we're charging that interest across, whether it's done on the capital financing requirement or whether it's done on an allocation of actual debt. I've seen 3 figures for the HRA borrowing. One is 127 million, which came from Chris Hartgrove when I asked him about a year ago. The second is the 190 odd million that appears in our Treasury management reports. And there's another one of, I don't know, 161 million or 200, some completely different figure that appears in the LGR analysis. So it looks to me as if that's an area where probably you can't answer it tonight, where we need to get a bit of scrutiny and where we ought to be doing our jobs as the Governance and Audit Committee better.
Mark, did you want to pick up a couple of those?
Sure, I'll pick up 1 and 2. The third point, I think Anna may need to come in on, and I'll just start with that and then wait for Anna to come in afterwards. So with MRP, looking at disaggregating costs as much as possible, we are moving towards that to be as transparent as possible, to make sure members understand that you don't just borrow money and it's cheap and easy. We have to absolutely predict forward MRP costs, interest costs, etc. And that has changed over time. And I would say, back to Councillor Dundas's sort of comment about optimism, I do think optimism bias has been at play on a number of projects, and something that we may talk to later is about risk, and risk appetite has definitely changed, and we have actually started to change that within reports as well to talk much more about risk appetite and why we should do things and reduce that optimism bias. So I'll bring Anna in later. Going back to the residential plots at Colchester Northern Gateway, yes, they are restricted to the social landlord market. As we discussed, that was a cabinet decision. Turnstone, so two parts to that question really. Cost overruns, yes, fall with them, the developers, and their deal that they had, so it is a fixed cost contract, so not to us as a council. But we may be reporting costs around Turnstone. I would again go to Anna on that one. We're also I know we've talked about its value and its value in the future, asset value, and that's something we are working on presenting in a better way as well. And when it comes to governance and an audit process, at this point in time, the reason you haven't as a committee looked at it is because the deal has been going on. It's still been a commercially live deal, and that is in no way any reason to stop audit happening and scrutiny happening. It needs to happen, and that has started in train, the collecting of that information, because we have talked about it at this committee and talked about it at scrutiny as well. So that needs to happen. It will happen, because there are lots of lessons to be learned, I think, through this deal and this project, to do with governance, to do with finance, contract management, etc., estates management. So that will happen. It's going to happen. Richard, I don't know if you want to say anything at that point, because you've been part of the beginnings of the collection of the information, collation of information for that. So those sort of answer questions 1 and 2. And if I pass to Richard, perhaps to finish off that second part of question 2, and then perhaps to Anna to talk about costs and then the further interest relations between the General Fund and HRA. Thank you. Richard.
Yes, so there's 3 main ways that this is being looked at. Firstly, we've already collated a detailed governance timeline. This is a complex project that spans multiple political administrations across multiple years, with many different councillors and officers involved in the decision making. But we have a clear timeline to show who decided what and on what basis. We're working with our external auditors on that, because clearly this is an area of interest for them in terms of how this is reported. We are also going to be commissioning our internal auditors to carry out a forensic commercial review, looking back at the governance and the decision making to be able to understand that same perspective, but from an independent view. And that will all be pulled together across those functions and reported back ultimately to this committee, which is the rightful place it should be.
Thank you. Anna, did you want to pick up on any of those points?
Just a couple of points, thanks, Chair. In terms of the relationship between the interest costs between HRA and General Fund, I can't answer that question now, so we will have to come back to you with an answer. The total borrowing costs of the HRA, I suspect that all the numbers are correct. They're at the points in time at which they are referring to. So that might be the issue, because I can't believe that we don't know what our borrowing costs are on HRA. So, of course, we can confirm those costs, but it would have to be at what point? Are we talking about in the accounts? Are we talking about which financial year? Are we talking about which point in time? So I can't answer the question without seeing the specificity of it, but we can come back to you with something on HRA borrowing costs. I'm pretty confident the costs, that what is in the Treasury Management report is correct with relation to that time frame. With transparency of cost, of course, we always try and do that. As I said to you right at the beginning, that this, for the first time, you didn't have this last year, but you have the gross costs of Turnstone, and I'm using Turnstone as an example, which is why we've got this situation of gross and net. So we could, what was previously reported to you was a net position, so you didn't have any cost on Turnstone because you had a reserve to apply it against, and I fundamentally disagree with that approach, because we don't net off in finance, we gross up to provide the transparency, which is what we are doing in these reports. So you see the cost, you see the income under recovery, and you see the application of the reserve, and you see the rundown of the reserve. So all of those things you see that you didn't see previously. So we continue to do that, and all we can do, as I said previously, is report the costs and give you as much narrative to go with those costs and all of the issues that pertain to various items such as Turnstone in the report. So we're always forever challenging to make sure we have enough narrative that tells a story to you as the reader. In terms of the interest and MRP and all of those corporate costs, they do reside in corporate income and expenditure. So we can take that away and see what we can do about providing more detail in the CIE line moving forward.
Thank you. Yes, William, do you want to come back? We do need to move on to the other items, 1.3
Yes,
and 1.4.
I just want to acknowledge that the grossing up of and the reporting things through the P&L account and then putting them through reserves, it's a breath of fresh air. Thank you very much for doing that. Can I take it that from what we've said, we'll get two things? One is a proper reconciliation of how the 65 million became 75 million for Turnstone and then went down to zero, which is truly extraordinary. And I suspect the zero is some accounting quirk. And I've asked to see the report from Norsa, whoever they are, the people who wrote the valuation report at zero. That's a truly extraordinary thing. So 65 to 75 to zero. And the second thing is, yes, more on the interest. More detail on the interest and the recharges between the HRA and how we calculate it, Anna. It's, do we take it off the CFR? Is there an allocation of debt? How does the system work? There's so many figures out there. I think we've lost, and I think a little bit more scrutiny from this committee around that in future would be really helpful.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the Turnstone reserve, this might be sort of a combination of sort of a bit of a political answer and a bit of an accounting answer, but as far as I can see, the overspend is mainly due to the vacant units that we have. Now, in the instance that we get further delays on this, now I know that we sort of have some of our optimistic hats on, but I'm just saying from a contingency perspective, what contingency is there and sort of how are we going to manage that additional overspend in the instance that we don't fill these units? And I suppose, how long does the contingency go on for? What's the plan if it doesn't go as we hope it goes?
I think fundamentally what we need to do is some scenario planning. So actually, if the world looks like this and the units are filled and everything happens, each month that something is delayed, what is the bottom line impact on that? And we can certainly go away and do that, because I think fundamentally we will need to know at what point, like you say, do we use up the reserve. So I think we just need to do a bit of scenario planning and come back on that, really, to give you a bit more.
So are we saying that we've done zero scenario planning on the project so far?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying from my point of view, I don't have a relationship with our corporate landlord team yet. That's something that's going to be developing. I'm pretty sure they have been doing that.
Okay, well, if we could have that.
We need to embed that into our finance revenue monitoring process. Yeah.
It's a multi-year project, and I would expect that to be right up the front, that we know what our contingency is. We know how far we can go with the project. We know how we extract ourselves from it, etc. I think all that stuff needs to be involved in this if we're going to do it properly.
Anna, did you want to add to what Caroline's saying?
Yes, and there has been a huge amount of scenario planning going on within the corporate landlord function. Caroline is new, so she's not aware of what's been going on. But I know for a fact there has been a huge amount of scenario planning happening for this eventuality. So what ends up happening will be a decision that we will take. We will look at it from a finance perspective, we will challenge, and then it's a conversation we need to have internally and I need to have with the portfolio holder in terms of how we take that forward. So there is a bit of a political spin on this, I understand, but it's for us to challenge and to find the reasons why and what we're going to do about it. But I don't want to leave you with the impression that we're just going, oh yeah, we're going to run down the reserve and that's okay. That is not the impression we want to give you at all, because I know there's a huge amount going on of work continually in corporate landlord to look at this very issue. Can I just come back on the valuation issue, William? The valuation issue will not be run through the management accounts. So I just don't want to give you the impression we're going to go away and come back with something on the valuation of Turnstone. That's going to play out through the audit, which it always will play out through the audit. It's not something we bring into the management accounts. So no doubt that the valuation of Turnstone is a concern for members, but it is something that's being dealt with through the audit process, and you will be updated by Emma in due course.
Thank you, Anna. Caroline, do you want to move on to items 1.3 and 1.4?
Okay, I just wanted to add that there were some general fund revenue questions that were submitted before that I haven't answered yet, if you'd like me to quickly do those. So, fit for future savings was asked, and I'm going to now defer to Richard to quickly answer that one. Thank you.
So, the 3-year period Fit for the Future covered started last year, where there was quite a large chunk of savings. This year, actually, there's only 150k of savings that were actually planned in greening and street care, and these are being forecast as on track for delivery, and indeed I think they've been delivered in terms of service changes that have been made already, just to give that assurance. There is a big chunk next year, and there's some chunky items that have been referred to in this meeting already that contribute to that around waste, as well as some further work in greening and street care and sport and leisure, which is being undertaken at the moment.
Okay, and there was a question around staff numbers, if they're falling or if they're flat, and I will again defer to Richard.
They're flat on the basis of the answer to the previous question, in that this year there was 150k's worth of savings. They've been delivered mainly through contract changes via ID Verdi, so the staff numbers are flat this year. Next year, obviously, we'd expect some changes associated with quite a chunk of savings that were going to need to be delivered as part of the portfolio.
Councillor Rowe, did you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, sorry, so it was 150,000 saving on greening and street care. Could you just expand on what that is? And secondly, as in like how we're actually saving it, as in what are we actually cutting back on? And secondly, you said that there's some large number of savings for next year. What sort of things can we expect to those savings to be? Can we have some sort of more, I don't know, whatever the number is going to be, how are we going to get to that number? It might be more of a political question. I don't know which one it is, but I'd appreciate if we could get some answers on that rather than just the headline figures.
On the greening and street care, I'll have to come back to you for this year. Savings that have been made, the detail will be able to be provided by the service. I think members will be aware there's some papers coming through both scrutiny panel, which I think you're a member of, Councillor Rowe, around some of these areas. So there will be ample opportunity for members to pre-scrutinise key strategies and service changes that will be put in place throughout the coming months.
Presumably that will be through the budget process as well. Yeah, Councillor Corey.
And with the budget process coming forward, later in the autumn scrutiny, we'll get first draft budget, which will also outline the budget gap, which we are working on at this point now, trying to understand how large it is, but it is large. So further savings will have to be made. We also have just seen a pay award agreed, which sees a further pressure on in-year as well as the following years. So again, we're going to have to look at how we balance that with some in-year savings as well. So we will continue to outline what the budget gaps are, and we will outline where we're going to make those savings. And in the budget report that comes to scrutiny, that will have more detail on where those are. At the moment, we're having to finalise those through service leads. That hasn't yet come to Cabinet. We have, as you'd expect, politically outlined where we believe we could look into savings. And those will be discussed with members, as we usually do with members' briefings running up to the budget process. Again, we rely on government to give us figures, so we're going to receive those figures drip-fed through slowly and not have them in time for our first draft budget, which is very frustrating. But at least we have got that pay award, so we know that much in terms of staff costs are a large part of our base budget. But we will keep updating and involving members as much as possible. We will ask members. There will be choices about which areas of services we do have to reduce, which will also mean headcount reducing. I'm not going to give any optimistic view on that. That is definitely going to have to happen.
So could Councillor Corey give us some insight into what the areas that those political decisions might cover, just so that we have an understanding of where we think we're going to be? I mean, you've already pointed out that headcount, for example, is going to be one of the areas that we might have to look at. What are the other sort of areas that we're having to, or that the Cabinet are having to look at to find these savings?
I won't be able to give you anything specific yet, Councillor Rowe, because it is everything. We have to look at everything. We have to look under every stone. We have to look at each department and challenge them to see where they can make savings or increase income, because that's another way in which we can help balance the books. One example for members to consider is something along the lines of we have our locality budgets. So that is a cost of £102,000 in the base budget each year. Looking at things like that, it adds up. So we do have to consider what things we believe the public want to see. The waste strategy is another one where we would look to introduce something that is not only good for the environment, but it's good for the cost of running the service. But overall, we are going to have to look at every part of the council.
So nothing's ring-fenced?
I think would you not prefer us to look at everything, I think is the question.
Yeah, that's fine. If that's what you're doing, that's fine. But I'm just saying, so nothing's ring-fenced, everything's on the table. You could potentially cut anything, other than obviously the statutory things that we have to provide. Everything's on the table. There could be cuts to anything.
As I said, we're going to go through members' briefings, so you will be involved, this committee will be involved at looking at how we can derive savings across services, how we can increase income across services. So we will look at everything we possibly can do. Every council up and down the country has to do that to be prudent and to be sustainable into the future.
Thank you. I think we need to move on from we've stepped into scrutiny and we need to move back into the governance and audit. Should we look at items 1.3 and 1.4? Because I'd like to cover the audit questions that were raised before we go to a break.
Apologies, are we looking at general fund capital now? Okay. Okay, so hopefully you've seen the deck, and the general fund capital programme is summarised in a table. We have got a budget allocation of 35.7 million added to the 16 million that was brought forward, and we've had 7.5 million of budget changes. So the revised budget is just shy of 60 million at 59.4 million. As at Q1, the council's forecasting an outturn of 38.2 million against the 59.4 million budget. So that is a slippage of about £21 million, or 36% on the capital programme. Modern city services, the forecast outturn is significantly below budget. A lot of this has been discussed with regards to waste strategy and the Shrub End Depot projects. We have got a small amount on corporate services of 0.5 million, and in Joy Colchester we've got an underspend of 1.8 million with slippage primarily due to cost escalation on the museum project. We've also got 1.3 million slippage primarily driven by ICT strategy, and the remainder of the budget is under review. As Anna has already mentioned, we have got a lot of work going on the capital programme to look at this year's and future years' profiling to make sure that the forecast and the numbers are robust as possible.
Thank you. Have we got any particular questions on that item? No? Okay, if you want to move on to the... Oh, yeah, sorry, William.
Yeah, I just feel sorry for you reporting these figures. Every year you know, we've only spent, I don't know, 6% or something of the capital budget. We're sort of, what are we, a quarter of the way through the year. And again, we're showing that we're only going to spend about half of it. And it's not your fault. It's the paralysis right through the organisation. So I guess we should ask the portfolio what's being done to drive these projects forward. And they just seem to go in circles and get stuck. And it just seems this capital budgeting, our eyes seem to be bigger than our stomachs. We say we're going to do this and we just never do.
Did you want to pick that up?
Not really. No, I think it has been a focus for some time with Anna and the new team coming in. We've had to focus on accounts. We've had to focus on a number of sort of issues with capacity. And I think we are now there with a good employment with Attila in capital finance. So he is going through that as we speak, looking at the projects and fully understanding why we have this slippage. We have spoken about it before in terms of some projects aren't exactly directly ours. So with the town deal, that doesn't help when areas are not spent. But other areas like the Colchester Northern Gateway, having the £7 million in there for infrastructure but not spending it, we need to look at how we present that, how we go about managing those finances as well. So I absolutely get the point, and we do get the point that we need to look at capital. To some extent, with certain projects, you do need to hedge your bets and say, right, we're going to have to look at future funding this. But at the same time, yeah, this slippage, I mean, Anna's talked about it, it's slippage now because it used to be sort of underspent. It was talked about in a different way that almost sold it as a positive. So we are on it, and we are going to, we're not just sort of looking at the headlines, we're looking at why. And again, optimism bias, we're looking at why projects aren't being delivered as quickly as we would want them to be. The last thing I said, there are some political choices in there. There are some choices where we say, actually, strategically, we don't want to spend that yet, etc. So there are some choices being made there. But again, we probably need to be better with our narrative explaining that.
I guess the ones to concentrate on are the ones where we've been given the money, the town deal and the levelling up fund ones. Heart of Greenstead, I've never got my hands around what they're trying to do even. We haven't seen a report or anything. Then there's some Botolph stuff, you know, those are the two big ones. How, as resources, is it your job as resources portfolio holder to put a bomb under these things? Whose job is it?
I wouldn't want to do that and put that anywhere, but between us, between the leader, Councillor Pearson and I, so St Botolph's, for example, is more dependent on another partner. The Heart of Greenstead, that is something we are absolutely talking about right now, and I hope soon we'll be able to bring to a committee about that, because there is a finite deadline on spending the money. So it's about us looking at the costs, seeing how we can sort of deliver the final parts that are needed and get that over the line. If not, we'd have to accept that we'd have to accept not delivering it and giving back money. That's not what we want to do. We want to use, and we have, this authority is very good at getting in grant and spending it, but how quickly is clearly what you're asking here, and I accept that. Again, with some of these town deal projects, we are working with partners to get to a final design, we're trying to get to a final scheme, and then we deliver it. So looking at projects that are wholly within our remit, I think we're slightly better at delivering on. But when it comes to working with partners, it is taking an age sometimes. And again, with the Colchester Northern Gateway, we have seen slippage there, which has been down to the constant back and forth of highways, national highways and Essex highways. So we can talk through the detail of that another time. But so there's a couple of points there. One is accepting slippage on our own part. One is working with partners and trying to deliver more quickly.
And yeah, is it you that's responsible for driving this forward, or?
Yeah, it does sometimes depend on the project. So David has overall lead for the town deal. I have lead for projects that are on our estate and involve our assets. And then, for example, with the St Botolphs, that's again more of a partnership work. So that will involve the leader mainly. Or if it's something to do with, say, cultural, then it might involve a portfolio holder for communities. So it does depend on the project, but mostly it would be myself and David, yeah. But I see Councillor Pearson wants to come in as well.
Councillor
Economic growth.
Pearson, I know this was something that did come under my portfolio at one time, so I don't know if you want to add something.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add a couple of things. One, certainly when it comes to the Heart of Grinstead project, Cabinet in its entirety has been keen to ensure that the shovels go into the ground as soon as possible on that one, so that we get that on the move. Those of us who've seen the email that came out this afternoon from the Chief Executive suggesting that North East Essex has been chosen to be one of the National Wave 1 pilot sites for neighbourhood health schemes will be aware that Grinstead could be very much near the top of that list. So we're hopeful that that will happen. When it comes to the town deal, Councillor Dundas will be aware that there is a meeting in a couple of days' time where we'll get an update. I spoke with Matt Sterling, who's our lead officer for this yesterday, about providing an update for each of the political groups following that meeting, so that we all have a steer as to what is going on with the rest of the city centre town deal.
Thank you very much. I think, can we finalise before we have a break? Yeah.
Yeah, just very, very briefly on the capital fund. I mean, I would totally agree with Councillor Corey's comment about, you know, concentrating on the town deal stuff, because who would have thought it's quite so difficult to spend money, but sometimes it is. But we've got to be realistic. You know, in less than 9 months' time, the expectation is the legislation will be laid before Parliament abolishing this council. We are running out of time. And we've got some projects on here that have been knocking around for about 5 years. There is only so much capacity left to do things. And there is only so much time before we are restricted from placing contracts and actually getting any of these off the ground. So let's decide, and it's probably about a year we've got left. I don't think people are appreciating just how quickly the end is coming and the lights are going to be switched off. Let's just decide as a council, out of all these capital projects, what do we really want to do? Because there's no way we're going to do all of them, okay? There's going to be, we might be able to do 20% of them if we're lucky. So let's decide what we really, really want to do, and let's just get them done and chuck all our resources at that. And I think that's a far better strategy rather than leaving things sitting around on the books, which have been there for years, which I've got to be honest, when we're sat here in the very, very last, the last governance and audit committee saying bye-bye to everyone, we'll still be looking at a piece of paper and they'll still be sitting here and we're saying, oh, what a shame, we never did that. But
Councillor Corey.
I agree with you. And the leader is here and has said very much that in a number of meetings where we have to be hyper-focused on what we can deliver. You are right, it's about a year that we have, and that goes both ways in terms of looking at land that we've talked about disposals within the members' estates group. Disposing of land also takes time, and we want to get some receipts in order to balance out some of the spending that we're doing. So, yeah, on both hands, we want to deliver and, in some cases, dispose in the time before LGR and the final day of our ability to spend on large projects kicks in, which kicks in before we actually formally start merging.
Okay, thank you. If we're happy to move on to the housing revenue account forecast, which is the final item, I think, under this report.
Okay, so I'll move over to HRA revenue. One of the questions was, does the interest include internal borrowing? And the answer is yes, it does. So this assumes internal and external. And HRA is not overcharged. It's based on brought forward debt plus estimated borrowing and expected borrowing rates for this financial year. So if I go to the presenting slide. Okay, so the Q1 forecast for HRA is a surplus of 0.95 million for this financial year against a break-even budget. The major variants identified to date are additional income of 0.5 million, reduced net interest charges and increased net interest income, provide an uplift of 1 million, and an increased revenue contribution to capital outlay of 0.55 million. There is a forecast overspend on repairs and maintenance void expenditure of 178k, but they are hopeful that that will be contained within budget by the end of the year, and future monitoring reports will give an update on to any change on that position. And after a transfer of earmarked reserve of 2 million approved by the Cabinet in June, general reserve has a forecast balance of 5 million as at the end of 25-26, which is above the benchmark minimum reserve of 3.98, which is 10% of turnover.
Any questions? Okay, so can I take that we're, Anna, I was going to suggest that we perhaps pick up the audit item after a break and before we go into the Treasury Management report. So can I ask if people are happy to note the revenue capital and housing revenue account
Yeah, happy to, just subject to the answers coming forward to the questions that are going to take away.
Okay.
Thank you.
Noted. Right, it's 20 to 8, so if we have a 10-minute break and then come back and we'll pick up the audit items. I'm back, thank you. Anna, do you want to make a start with perhaps picking up as the tail end of the last item, the question on the audit questions that were raised in a previous meeting?
Yes, Chair. Sorry, I'm getting feedback. So the short answer to this question is that I spoke to Emma about it, and no, we haven't. But her comment back to me was that she notes the Councillor Sunnex's question, and all of this will play out through the audit. So she will come back and she will look at those questions as part of her audit, and that will play out as part of the audit to the committee, and those questions would be answered as we go through the audit process. I have also asked Emma to come to the next finance-related audit committee on the 18th of November, where she will provide an update on the audit, and she will also talk about the progress and how we're progressing towards the signing of the 24-25 accounts, which statutorily need to be signed by the 27th of February 2026. So we will know more about how the audit's progressing in November. The auditors are currently doing a three-week piece of work, and they will be back in October to do some more auditing.
Okay, thank you very much. Did you want to pick up the cash flow question now or after the Treasury Management report?
So it's all wrapped up in the Treasury Management report. So what I'll do is I'll go through all of it, if I may, because it all comes together in the same report. So the questions on first I'll go to the questions on the Treasury Management. The question of the extra £43 million of extra borrowing, that was answered at the last meeting, and it's all HRA related borrowing. I can't add any more than what was presented at the last meeting, I'm afraid. This happened just as I was entering the council, and I was told by my predecessor that it was a requirement to borrow £43 million for the HRA, and that decision was made. It's not great, the approach and how it was arrived at, and I understand the members' concerns, but there are a number of changes and things that I need to do on Treasury Management, and I'll explain a little bit more as to what I am doing to try and improve the situation moving forward. And that wraps up the next question around cash flows. The answer is, can you see cash flows? The answer is a no, and I will explain why no is the answer I'm giving you at the moment, which is all wrapped up into what improvements we need to make on Treasury Management. Since some of you may not be aware yet, but Paul Atkinson, who is my current interim Deputy Director of Finance, is leaving Colchester on the 3rd of October. And as a result of his departure, I'm not replacing like for like. I am taking Treasury Management under my control. And I've started already looking at how we can improve some aspects of Treasury Management. And one of those is producing a more robust forecasting and cash flow forecasting information. I know that you will probably argue transparency, but for me, the transparency doesn't come by giving you the cash flows, because that is an operational issue for me as a Section 151 to deal with. How it will manifest itself is in better and more planned information that comes to the committee, so you're well aware that when we have to go out and borrow, you will know why we have to borrow and at what point we have to borrow, and we will make sure that we time them in with the relevant audit committee, so you can have full transparency as to why the borrowing needs to happen. Now, in terms of the improvements that I think we need to make in order to get us to a better place, and I'm referring more specifically to the out of the blue HRA borrowing of 43 million, which is what I encountered virtually as soon as I started. with not a lot of explanation. Did my best to challenge, but the ultimate outcome was that we had to go and borrow. So Zoe Latham, who is our Treasury Officer, is going to be reporting to me directly moving forward. And she is quite junior, but I think it's important that I give her some support, and also I'm quite clear on what improvements need to be made in the function. We are also already having the diary quarterly meetings with our Treasury advisors, MUFG, which were only previously, they were only being met with once a year. So I've asked for quarterly meetings post the relevant MPC. Thirdly, I want our cash flow forecasting to be undertaken in up to 12 months in advance, which currently is not being done that way. I don't know exactly, but I believe it's over a shorter period. So I want it to be rolled out to 12 months hence. I've also put in train with Zoe some better information, a better process for her to collect her information in terms of where the vital bits of the ins and outs of the cash flows reside. So I've put her in contact with relevant people to improve the forecasting. And then the other two bits are that with this analysis, when we come to you and suggest that we need to borrow, which I understand we probably will be in that position towards the end of the year, but I'm waiting for these improvements to come through to determine the exact amount, that you will have complete and utter clarity as to why we would be in the position to borrow, when and how, and the process we're going to go about borrowing, the interest rates, etc., which you don't have now, and I completely agree is not acceptable. And thirdly, I'm tying that into doing some forward planning, so we're tying that into future G&A meetings. So the requirement to borrow is planned in and is presented at future G&A meetings. So that's my quite lengthy response as to why I don't think just providing you cash flows, which is very operational, is the correct way of approaching this. Would you like me to continue? I only have a few more comments to make on the Treasury report, Chair.
William, did you want to come back first?
Yes, I'm very pleased to hear the approach you're taking, and that we're backing away from some very confusing reporting. I'd like the fact that it wasn't in the report today. When I talk about cash flows, I'm not talking about the 12-month cash flows, talking about the sort of 5-year cash flows. And the big figures are already there in the capital reporting, where we split it down between how much we fund from grants and how much from reserves and how much from new borrowing. The key figures are there. You can very quickly do something there. So that's much more what I'm thinking of. I'm not particularly interested in the 12 months, and everything you suggest for dealing with that sounds like the right approach. I'm slightly hoping that, I guess my only question is, how long is that going to take? Will that be sorted by the budget next February, do you think?
So in order to do what you're asking, William, and it's a work in progress. So I'm not going to promise you the earth and not deliver, because that's not what I do. So I'm promising incremental improvements. Yes, you're right about capital, but we don't borrow for specific purposes, but obviously that's part of the cash flow. So it goes back to the question goes back to the topic we were discussing previously about where we are with our capital program. We need to have a very clear view about what our capital program is going to be in year and the sources of funding of that, i.e. grant funded, Section 106, etc., and what the requirement is on borrowing and what that looks like over the MTFF. Once we get that sorted, we'll be well on our way of understanding what the more long-term view of cash flow is. At the moment, we need to get better on the immediate view on cash flow requirements, which I don't think we're quite there yet.
Thank you. Do you want to move on to the Treasury report?
Yes, I will. I don't have a lot to say on this report because it's quite short, and I think quite self-explanatory, except for a particular item on here, which is item 1.4 on borrowing, and it states that there was a reduction of 5.7 on the borrowing, on external borrowing from the 184.9. And I asked for an explanation of that. And the reason is that we repaid £5 million of general fund borrowing, and we repaid 0.7 million of HRA borrowing. The general fund borrowing was originally taken out by from another local authority, and the 0.7 from PWLB. The repayment of that was paid as a result of liquidating an investment. Apparently, what's happened here historically, I wasn't aware of this, which is another reason why I need to take more control of it. There's been historic decisions made by my predecessor that every time an investment came up for renewal, that it was liquidated and it went to pay borrowing, particularly more recently. And I can understand that as interest rates have been dropping on investment. But it's something that I can't find the genesis of. And I need to be closer to understand that when a loan comes up for repayment or refinancing, that I understand why, and we look at the options and we look at the costs. That's not done to the level of my satisfaction at this point in time, but we are almost now down to very low levels of investments because of historic decisions made to liquidate investments as they come due. And that's what I wanted to say on that one, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's quite a high level of assurance on that. Has anybody got any particular questions that they want to ask? Or we're happy as a committee to note the contents of the report then? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Anna. I am aware that you're remote because you're going away, so do have a very good, well-earned break, and we'll see you on your return.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, item 8.3, which is the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman Annual Review Letter. I think we have Andrew Weavers here, Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer, to bring that report to a committee's attention. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening, Chair. Good evening, Committee. So, indeed, this report is on the annual review letter from the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman. The report sets out the findings of the Ombudsman's annual letter, and really all I'm going to do is sort of really draw your attention to the key headlines which are set out in paragraph 5 of the report. So the main headline news around there is no findings of maladministration against the Council. No reports were issued. However, there were 2 complaints that were upheld by the Ombudsman, but you can see the actual number of complaints that the Ombudsman received during the year from the annual letter, which is appended. They have changed the formatting of the annual letter, so it is slightly different to what it was last year. Paragraph 5.3 gives you the details of those 2 complaints that were upheld, and both the service area involved has improved their processes to the satisfaction of the Ombudsman in both cases. This report has also gone to Cabinet, and last month when Cabinet approved it. So, Chair, happy to take any questions, and the report is for the committee to note. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Has anybody got anything they want to raise? No, I don't think so. So we will note the contents of the report then. Thank you very much. Okay, item 9, the work programme for 25-26, which provides the details of reports that are scheduled for each meeting. Matthew, do you have any changes on that?
No, the only thing I'd say on this report, Chair, is, as Anna alluded to earlier, I've had confirmation from our external auditors that they'll be bringing an interim annual auditor report and a progress update to the November meeting, and that's not recorded on the work programme at the moment, but it will go on for the next meeting. And other than that, it's as written. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So yes, Councillor Sunnock.
Yes, before that November meeting, would it be worth having one of the private sessions with the auditors where we can, we've had them before at 5 o'clock, haven't we?
Yes, I think that was going to be in the plan, but I will follow that up. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, I think with that we've concluded the business for tonight. So thank you all very much for your time, and the meeting is closed.